Hello, hello, and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I am so happy to speak with you today. I hope you are well. If you've been following my show, you'll know that I was in Spain last week. It was for an amazing retreat in the Muga Valley outside of Barcelona, deep in the woods. We took like an hour on a dirt road just to get there, but it was an incredible place called the Home for the Pioneers of Our Time. And it's specifically for people who are trying to make a difference and coming together in this beautiful location, beautiful old location. The oldest building was from 1200, and really connecting with each other and connecting with nature and connecting with ourselves. So it was absolutely wonderful. I had the best massage of my entire life there, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. So I'm doing very well. Let's put it that way. I had a really wonderful time, wonderful, amazing, wonderful people. Highly recommend you check it out, by the way, pioneersofourtime.com. And the gentleman who runs it and founded it, his name is Steph, and he is now a good friend of mine and I adore him. So check it out. Anyway, so today I want to talk about something that actually came up for me just today. So those of you who know my work, you know that my signature technique is called the drawing out process. And it's all about drawing out what's inside of us that maybe we're carrying subconsciously, both the light and the dark. So we have those parts of us that are stuck in the dark, as I always talk about, those X powers. And then we also have our M powers and our truth and our guiding star. We have these parts inside of us. And so anyway, the point is that with the drawing out, it's all about bringing forward what's coming to the surface. But usually that starts with even noticing that there's something there. And so it was interesting because today I was noticing I've been noticing some fears that have come up that have sort of blocked me. And this is, long history with this. I don't know about you, but I have a long history with blocks and fears and things like that. But this one was a little bit different in that I became aware of, and this happens sometimes where I become aware of like a physical sensation inside of me that it feels like an actual physical block. I've had a lot of these over the years. And what I often do is I will draw out. So I will draw how it feels or appears to me. And sometimes it will have a face and sometimes it'll just be sort of an amoebus thing. And in this case, it was an amoeba sort of shape, but I could feel it up into my throat and down into my gut. There's this whole sort of area right here. And maybe you've experienced these sort of sensations before. And I've processed a lot of them in the past, and I've healed them and released them through the drawing out process. And today, though, one came up that I noticed was saying certain things to me that I thought, And it really made me kind of wonder about this. And it brought up this question of spiritual, and I'm going to put quotes around that, spiritual self-protection is the term that came to my mind. So first of all, I just want to show you what I drew. Now, when I draw in my journal nowadays, my early drawings were a little more like colorful and complicated. Now, it's pretty much scribbly. And this is meant to be like my neck and my shoulders. And this is that feeling that was up inside me. So what I wrote was this: spiritual part of me that's been trying to make me feel better about where I am. And that when I write that, I mean where I am with my work and in terms of having, on my mission, in my life's mission, where I am, it makes me believe that basically that the stars will just magically align for me to be just miraculously living my truth. And in the past, if you've seen previous episodes, I talk about my inner guiding star, and that we all have an inner guiding star of who we're here to be, fully living our truth. And it's that image that we have. And so I have a very clear image of my own personal guiding star and what she's doing. And I've talked about her in previous episodes. So you can, especially the one about the guiding star, I'm pretty sure I talk about her. But anyway, the point is I have a very clear image of who I'm here to be and the impact I'm here to have. And so what this part of me, well, let me just go into this. So basically the fear is up into my throat, down into my belly, and it tries to rationalize that I'm going to live my truth no matter what. And it tries to reassure me, and it tries to make me feel better so that I don't get upset and overwhelmed and feel pressured So, and then it does something else. I'll tell you what else it does. So the point is, I've got this truth that I know I'm here to live. And you may have a truth that you know you're here to live. Hopefully you're aware of that, or a mission or a purpose that you're here to serve and you're here to achieve. And so I have a very, very strong sense of that. And it's so strong that it's been overwhelming at times. And it's felt like pressure because it's the sense of like, okay, so here's who I'm here to be. Here's who I know I'm here to be. And yet at the same time, there's this, but I'm not there yet. And oh my God, that's so huge and overwhelming. And I don't know how to get there. So that is basically what happened was, well, let me just keep going. So the point is, it's like one thing to know you have a truth and to say, yes, I know who I'm here to be, and to have it be inspiring and exciting and like, yes, I know that I can be that person. And as I've shared in previous episodes, my inner guiding star, that image of who I'm here to be, got me out of my darkest place of my life. So she has served a magnificent purpose for me in helping me to even be just a functional human being, and really helping me to release all the old pains and fears and fragments and really step into my truth and my power. But at the same time, along the way, I have these bouts of feeling pressured and overwhelmed and scared and nervous and helpless and hopeless. And I'm never going to achieve that. So basically what this part of me did was it formed, and it later explains this to me, is that, well, let me see, I think I wrote down what it said, that it scared of me being overwhelmed and pressured by the enormity of my purpose and the work that is required to achieve it. So I asked this part of me, well, what would you do if you weren't here? Or what are you afraid would happen to me, basically, if you weren't here? I asked this part of me, and I said, if I weren't here, you'd get severely overwhelmed and you'd never stop to take care of yourself. And then I said, when did you first show up? And it said, when you got your calling. So that strong sense of your calling and your huge purpose, but you weren't ready for it yet. So basically what this part of me has been doing is that it showed up when I first became aware, or around the time that I first became aware that I had this purpose and calling, and yet I wasn't ready for it. And that's, in other words, like I still hadn't gained that inner power, enough of that sense of self and connection with my truth and that inner power. So this part of me showed up to try to protect me, because it could see that feel that I was overwhelmed. And so it didn't want me to feel too overwhelmed and too pressured, because, and I remember times when I felt so overwhelmed and pressured internally, or by knowing this, that I would shut down. And so interestingly about this part, now there are a lot of parts of us that do this to protect us, but the reason why I bring up this idea of spiritual self-protection is because it uses sort of spiritual beliefs and sort of spiritual principles to convince me, to rationalize, to justify, to help me feel better about where I am, even if it's not where I know I can be, to try to calm down my feelings and basically, ultimately, to tamp down on the feelings I'm actually feeling. And so this is where this part of me, the reason why it was important to draw it out, is because what I realized is that it has been stopping me from taking action towards being my guiding star, towards achieving the truth that I know I'm here to achieve. And that I know that I also have to work really hard to achieve. So what it's been doing in this really interesting, very, very well-intended way, obviously, as I'm sharing all this, I'm hoping that you're kind of noticing if you've got these parts within yourself that might be doing this, is that it's very well-intended in terms of it's trying to keep me from getting overwhelmed. It's trying to keep me from pressuring myself too much because it's seen me do this. But what ultimately it may have formed, it formed at a time when maybe I did need a part of me to do that, to protect me from that overwhelm, which would have shut me down. But what I'm noticing now is that I'm actually powerful enough to achieve what I'm here to achieve. I've gained enough, or I've retrieved, if you will, enough of my inner power to really have that input, to be that presence, to do the hard work that needs to be done without shutting down, without getting too overwhelmed, I can handle it better now than I did back then when this part of me formed. But the thing is, and this is the way it often is with X powers, again, if you've heard me talk about this, when it comes to X powers, they will often keep doing the job that they were originally tasked to do or took upon themselves to do. They will keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that well past the time when we need them to. That's the difference between having like a protective mechanism, sort of a defense mechanism, but maybe it truly is there to protect us. But however, it becomes problematic, what I would call an X power, when it's basically outliving its purpose, when we don't need it to do that job anymore, when we've grown from being a child to being an adult, for example, when we've grown from being in an abusive situation to actually being free and autonomous and sovereign and able to take care of ourselves, but we still have those defense mechanisms that are trying to protect us. And sometimes they're doing a really good job and doing it very effectively, but a lot of times they can be doing it far more than we need them to, and to the point where it's self-sabotage, where we're sabotaging ourselves. And so this part of me, this part that I drew, that's this, lump that's inside of my chest and everything. I know it's just very basic, but it really doesn't take much. You don't need artistic skills to do the drawing out process. So basically what I realized is that this was a part of me that was trying to protect me, as many parts in the past have, by trying to help me feel better about, or trying to, protect me from fear in one way or another with what it said, or by holding me back. But this one was really interesting, and it opened up this question of how we can use our spiritual beliefs and how these parts of us can sometimes use our spiritual beliefs to try to protect us from our own emotions. And for a time that can serve us. It served me, I think, for a time when I needed it, but then sometimes it can end up not serving us. And so this was a part of me that's not been serving me. If anything, it's been sabotaging my ability to get work done, because it's so afraid that I'll get overwhelmed that it'll immediately and choke, and I'll feel that and will hold me back. And then I have to sit and process it and draw it out and all that. So in this case, though, I explained to it that basically you've been keeping me from stepping up and working really hard. And this is something else I noticed it was doing, and this is what sometimes these parts of us will do, is it actually was also stopping me from having the clarity, like having a clear vision at times of the work that I needed to do, having a clear strategy. So it's not only, it's been blocking me emotionally, physically, and with its sort of spiritual bypassing, which I'll mention to you, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the spiritual bypassing, even a little bit of maybe spiritual gaslighting, I don't know. But the point is, it's not only been doing it that way, but it's been doing it up here and creating a kind of like mental fog, preventing me from even seeing the possibilities or seeing like, here's what you need to do. So it's like stopping me from doing anything, but also one way it does it is by stopping me from even seeing a clear path towards living my truth, because it's afraid I'll get overwhelmed and then I'll shut down and then I'll hate myself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been stopping me from knowing and seeing clearly. Now, here's the interesting thing, and notice that I've been sharing a few questions that I tend to ask these parts, whether in session or of myself or of my own parts. But one of the questions I sometimes ask a part is, do you want to keep doing this forever? And it said no. It said no. It said, I actually want you to feel super confident. I want you to feel clear. I want you to feel empowered. I want you to feel productive. And so this is classic. I probably talked about this before when I've talked about controllers, which is what this is, one of those X power types. And that controllers will tend to actually want the very things for us that it's preventing us from. It'll tend to make us feel the ways in which it actually doesn't want us to feel, but it will do this and it will end up sabotaging us. It's a very counterintuitive thing. So it's actually saying, no, I want you to feel motivated. And yet what is it doing? It's demotivating me. It's trying to stop me from being productive and motivated. And so it's just this interesting contrast. I'm sharing a lot of random tidbits with you, but for whatever it's worth, I hope it's helpful. So I did mention spiritual, I use the term spiritual self-protection in this context, in which we can tend to use those spiritual beliefs. Like for me, one of the beliefs that I have is, well, I have this truth, and therefore, this is like a conclusion, or this is what this part of me has told me. Well, therefore, it's inevitable that I will be that presence. It's like, therefore, it's inevitable that I will become that person. Therefore, it's inevitable that I will achieve this mission. That's who I'm here to be, and therefore, it seems like things aren't working out right now, but it's okay because I know that something better is coming. Now, mind you, I don't necessarily disagree with that statement, but here's the difference in terms of what I'm talking about here, is that basically this part of me was telling me those things, and those and a lot of other things, to try to get me to basically not deal with the fact that I'm scared, not deal with my own fears. It's trying to calm me down, like almost preemptively calm me down. No, everything's fine. It's okay. God will provide, or, the answers are coming. And I'm not saying that's not true, but what it's doing is almost like spiritually trying to spiritually bypass my actual feelings, trying to prevent me from feeling how I'm actually feeling. And not only that, though, prevent me from doing the hard work that is necessary to actually achieve that mission, to be that presence. So this is where spiritual bypassing, the term, comes in. And so it's like this part of me is doing a spiritual self-protection, if you will, but it's also a kind of spiritual bypassing, trying to keep me from actually being tuned into my own feelings, because it's afraid of what will happen if I were to truly feel those feelings. And so this is where I want to read a definition of spiritual bypassing. You may be familiar with this term, or you may not. I only heard this term like a couple, 3 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, that's a brilliant term, because I actually have been through plenty of years and periods of my life where I did this, and I allowed other people to do this to me, or I adhered to certain belief systems that enabled this within me. So anyway, I just want to give you a little bit of background on what is spiritual bypassing. So this is the way verywellminds.com defines it. It says spiritual bypassing is a way of hiding behind spirituality or spiritual practices. It prevents people from acknowledging what they are feeling and distances them from both themselves and others. Okay, so a way of preventing people from acknowledging what they're feeling and distancing them from themselves and others. Notice that that's what this part of me has been doing, spiritually bypassing or trying to my feelings, because of, it's afraid I'll get overwhelmed and feel pressured, etc., or work too hard and not take care of myself. I've been through all of those before. So some examples of spiritual bypassing include avoiding feelings of anger, believing in your own spiritual superiority as a way to hide from insecurities. This, I would actually say, is one of those inner defender things. That's what it sometimes does. Believing that traumatic events must serve as learning experiences, or that there is a silver lining behind every negative experience. I want to caveat this and say that I don't think there's something wrong with that belief, because I do believe that there can be blessings that come from traumatic experiences. However, when we do that as a way of trying to avoid the actual impact of that traumatic event, or the actual negative feelings around that experience, that's what I would say is more about spiritual bypassing. That's a toxic kind of thing that we do to ourselves, or that others can do to us. So in addition, believing that spiritual practices such as meditation or prayer are always positive. I don't know that I totally understand that one, but I guess it's a way of saying that sometimes meditation and prayer can be ways of avoiding how we feel. Extremely high, often unattainable idealism, feelings of detachment. So when we feel sort of emotionally detached, focusing only on spirituality and ignoring the present. Now, I think I talked about this in a previous episode where I talked about how it's like sometimes we can be in such this space of, oh, I'm so spiritual and I'm just so connected with spirit, that we're not really fully present and we're not really grounded in reality. And that's where that can be unhelpful. Only focusing on the positive or being overly optimistic, projecting our own negative feelings onto others. So basically, we think that we're so spiritual and yet we're seeing all this negative stuff in them that somehow they need to fix, or maybe they need a certain spiritual practice to fix this within them. Pretending, those are my own words around that, pretending that things are fine when they are clearly not. Thinking that people can overcome their problems through positive thinking. Thinking that you must rise above your emotions. And using defense mechanisms such as denial and repression. So ultimately, spiritual bypassing is a superficial way of glossing over problems in a way that might make us feel better in the short term, but ultimately solves nothing and just leaves the problems to linger on. Interesting, because as I read that, I'm just like, well, yeah, that's what I noticed inside of myself, is this part of me that was basically doing this spiritual bypassing. Its intentions for me were good, just as the intentions, if you're noticing you've got parts of you that are trying to protect you from your own feelings, or you might even be doing this to other people where it's like, oh no, and you try to put that positive spin, or rather than, or you try to act as though no, they're just not seeing things clearly, and really there's some higher spiritual perspective that that they should only focus on that. That is where I think that it's saying that spiritual bypassing, and definitely for me in terms of my part of me, was not helping me, because it's not allowing me, or was not allowing me, to be in the both and of reality. So yes, it can be that, yes, this is my truth, this is my guiding star, this is who I'm here to be, this is the mission I'm here to serve, and I have a lot of work to do to achieve it. It's not as though it's a foregone conclusion that I will achieve these things. It's meant to be more of a beacon of light for me to follow, a guiding star. That's why I call it your inner guiding star. And so for me, I'm noticing with this part that it was not allowing me to be in the both and. And this is why I chose the topic of this episode as being about, like, when we spiritually try to protect ourselves from our emotions, that can be a very, very toxic thing, in which we actually prevent ourselves from feeling how we truly feel. And others can do this too, to us. So it's interesting, because usually spiritual bypassing is oftentimes, I think, represented or presented as like something that someone does to us, or that maybe we do to others. But notice how it's like mine was doing it to me. It was using it to, it was doing the spiritual bypassing as a way of trying to protect me from my feelings, because it's afraid of worse feelings, or it's afraid of me falling apart. And it has very genuine, real reasons for why it's doing that, because it's seen that happen to me before. But the problem with that, again, is that means that it was also preventing me from really actually taking action in the ways that I need to, and actually doing the tough work that it takes to live your truth, to be fully in your power, to fulfill my mission, for me to live my truth, me to live in my power, me to fully fulfill my mission, and be as much of my guiding star as I can possibly be. So it's something that I want you to just be aware of. As always, this is about inner work for greater good. And in order to really do that inner work, we've got to be honest with ourselves about what's going on, and honest with our feelings. And at the same time, honest, like, notice those parts of us that are trying to protect us from really honoring those feelings, so that we can be fully whole and integrated, not in this, like, I'm feeling all this fear and feeling all this negativity, but I've got this part of me that says, well, no, everything's fine and everything's going to be okay. It's not bad to have that part. It's just that if it's causing us to repress or deny, or preventing us from taking action, that's when that's a problem. When action needs to be taken, that's when that's a problem. So I hope you're understanding the distinction here. And so by that notion, I see it, the way I see it is, life is a co-creation. So, and I've talked about this, I think, before, with like with believing that like, oh no, God is doing everything. And the problem with sort of believing that somehow like, no, everything's all done for us or taken care of is that what that can do is remove our agency and our responsibility from whatever it is that we're here to do, or whatever presence we're here to be, or whatever impact we're here to have. We might do that to protect ourselves from the emotional overwhelm. But at the same time, it can also be that we are trying to detach ourselves from those overwhelming feelings rather than just honoring them and acknowledging them. And so the way I see it is we are co-creating with God. And so, yes, there may be a divine plan for all of us. And it is our job to play a role in that we have to be fully present in that, and that we need to show up fully and not sort of use that as, well, there's a plan for me and I'm just can sit here and act like I have nothing, well, there's a plan. Yes, and we must be active participants in our own lives. So I'm saying this to myself. Yes, I have a truth I'm here to fulfill. Yes, I have a guiding star that I am becoming more and more like her every day. Yes, I have this vision for this, presence that I want my work to be in the world. And I have to work really hard to achieve that. So yes, there is a divine plan, and I have to fully show up in it. So we have to fully show up in it. And the way I see that too is that, okay, if God works through us, well, then we need to let God work through us, not just sort of lay about and act as though everything's already taken care of and we don't have to do anything. I hope this is making sense. So yes, God will provide, and we also need to take responsibility for our own lives so that God can provide more easily for us. Yes, I have a truth I am here to live, and I have to take those actions, and do the inner work, whatever that is at any given moment, to live that truth, to fulfill that purpose and that mission. So it's the both and of it. And on that journey, and I have found this, and you have probably found this, and we will all continue to discover this for ourselves, is that it can be really hard, and it can be really emotional, and it can trigger the hell out of us, literally the dark parts, I guess, out of us. That was a dumb joke. But it can trigger the hell out of us, and it can trigger these parts. And so it can really push our buttons and really challenge us to really step into our power more than we ever imagined. And at the same time, that's part of the journey, that's part of the job. And if you've got, like I discovered I had, those spiritual parts of you that are actually preventing you from really getting real with how you're feeling, and preventing you from actually taking action, because it's trying to protect you. Of course, it doesn't want you to hurt, doesn't want you to be scared. If you've got those parts, be aware of those